We have assisting me in the opining old friends of the show, David Almasi, Executive Director for the National Center for Public Policy Research. David, good to have you back.
Hi.
Also on board, none other than Robert Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton Drug Czar General Barry McCaffrey. Good to have you back, Bob.
Good to be back, Alan. And you asked a question, would your guests agree with you? It's not the merits. It's the fact that they unelected the elected so they could have had another election. That's how they should have played it in Egypt.
But if the mechanism by which you would ever bring about that change is being systematically dismantled by the very monster you have in power, don't you see how these agendas are in conflict with one another?
Then you have recalls, as we've done all over the place in our governorships, and you have new elections. I mean, if they really screwed up the new elections, that would be a different story. But they didn't even get to round two. They were in it 1 year, and they suddenly a revolution on the street is reason for the military to take over the country and say, no, you don't have the right. Do you know that the facts are that 1 year after every presidential election in the United States, I think 90% of the time the other guy would have won?
But that has nothing to do with the kind of popular uprising
we don't
we're
have
talking
repressive
about.
tactics here to stop that from happening. That's the thing. We let a bunch of crazies get into power in Egypt because the Obama foreign policy is just to sit back and not criticize the radical Islamists at all. And unlike we do with other governments, and that's the people rebelled against that. And they
See,
were
Bob, this is
for leadership.
This is what has me scratch my head. First of all, this wasn't a conventional coup d'etat. The vast majority of the country wanted this guy out in the millions, and they took to the streets.
You assume that. It was actually 2/3, 1/3, so that's a poll. Our presidents fall down into the 20s. Should we throw them out?
These guys went out into the streets because they saw that the very thing Bob Weiner is recommending should have been the alternative, were mechanisms that were being slowly but surely removed by this man. You know, the old idea, one vote, one time. One man, one vote, one time. That's where we seem to have been headed. I mean, let me run this by both of you guys, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong. Because it seems that the Muslim Brotherhood and their supporters want us all to forget the actions that led to Morsi's ouster, and with him their influence. Think about that. We're talking about their unabashed grabbing of power. That was documented. You've spoken about this on my show, Bob.
Yes.
Also, the usurping of citizens' rights, his early dismissal of the judiciary, jailing more activists and reporters in 1 year than Mubarak had in 30 years. Also, they, of course, were insisting on Sharia law, which completely strips away all rights of redress for women, as well as diminishing it for all men who are not part of the clerical hierarchy. And, of course, ignoring the country's desperately required economic and political reform. Again, it's as if the Muslim Brotherhood is saying, how dare you resist our systematic deconstruction of the very democratic process that got us elected? How dare you resist our oppression of you? Guys, where am I that far off the mark? First, David, to you.
Well, it's that these people are the radicals. They're the ones that insist on their religion, their rules all the time. And of all the countries in the Middle East, Egypt is very diverse. And what you were seeing, you're seeing it now, especially because they put it into high gear, repression of other religions. The Christians are under attack in Egypt. And unfortunately, it seems that the United States is impotent in trying to assess the situation. The people of Egypt didn't want what Morsi was giving them, and he wasn't listening to what they were saying. So a revolution a year later, as unfortunate as that was, as unexpected as it was, happened. That's the way things go when you don't listen to what the people have to say.
Bob, to you, Bob Weiner. Can you understand?
Understand
how the guy's early dismissal of the judiciary, jailing more activists and reporters in 1 year than had his predecessor in 30, and insisting on Sharia law? Can you not understand how this will remove the very mechanism you think should have been taken advantage of, which of course would have required waiting for the next election cycle, by which time many of the very rights and privileges for voting for an alternate candidate would have been rendered null and void, would have been made to disappear, Bob?
No, they didn't get to that point. First of all,
how do you? Whoa! He jails more activists and reporters in 1 year than Mubarak did in 30, and you didn't think they were quickly heading in that direction?
And the military kills 1,000 people who are peacefully protesting, and 10,000 injured, and they're using guns and all that on their own people.
You do realize the people that they were rough with have been currently setting to fire churches for the Coptic Christians, setting afire schools, setting afire churches, setting to fire homes. This is the Muslim Brotherhood.
This is an American protest.
Sweeping all with a brush that doesn't include all, and by any means. Those were a lot of peaceful protesters that they shot into. But the point is that these people didn't even try to take the recall route. They didn't even try to demand new elections. They didn't go any of those routes. Granted, they're a young democracy, and I think that their ideology is horrendous, and I think Israel's far better with the military than they are with the Muslim Brotherhood, and I think we need the national security interest in Egypt. However, what happened in Egypt is inexcusable. They should have gone to new elections.
We have assisted me in the opining old friends of the show, Bob Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton Drug Czar General Barry McCaffrey. He's also former communications director for Congressman Rangel and Conyers of New York and Michigan, respectively. And in addition, we have David Almasi, executive director for the National Center for Public Policy Research. Give a big hello to Amy Ridenhour for us, will you, David?
I will.
Excellent, excellent. I think when we take a look at the immigration challenge of today, and I was just chatting with former Congressman J.D. Hayworth about this. I've always believed that it was attributable to two groups, corporate righties wanting cheap labor and socialist lefties wanting cheap votes. And the hierarchy of both parties have been so often putting forward bad faith arguments that the real rub too often gets lost. So I want to look at the rub separating everybody right now and get a reaction from you guys, a compromise suggestion that I've had. I've been running by a number of congressional leaders. Most have liked it. Congressman J.D. Hayworth didn't care for it, but I've heard from other Republicans and Democrats who have actually liked it. And I'll start with you, David, and then I want Bob to weigh in on this. Now, right now as we speak, the Senate's immigration reform bill says illegal immigrants can get pretty quick legal status by simply applying for these non-immigrant visas or work permits. They're going to have no federal benefits, but that's what they would have. At that point, after that, we then get border security upgrades, which, upon completion, would then allow these non-immigrant visa holders to apply for a green card, but they couldn't do it for 10 years. They could go for citizenship, but not till after 13 years. Now, most Republicans in the House say the Senate's immigration reform is a non-starter unless border security comes before everything else. So here's my way out of this, and let me see what you guys think, and I'll accept all the abuse you wish to throw at me. My suggested compromise says, let's have 90% border security certified by the Government Accounting Office in 1 year, after which nothing happens before that. Nothing happens before that, not until we get 90% border security certified by the GAO, and again, in 1 year, after which illegal immigrants could then have their non-immigrant visa status, followed by a 2-year wait for a green card, and another 2 years before applying for citizenship. So let me give it to you in this way. Those who've been playing by the rules, of course, would receive expedited green cards as a matter of fair play. Let me get that out of the way. But this revamped deal would give border security fans such as yours truly what we want first. After all, it is an already existing constitutional Article 4 and 14th Amendment protection to which Americans are entitled. It's as simple as that. However, fans of pathways to citizenship will also get a bigger prize than originally envisioned. Here's what I propose. Instead of having to wait 10 years for a green card, they only have to wait 3. And instead of waiting 13 years for citizenship, they only have to wait 5. And, of course, all those who applied legally get fast-tracked as immediately as is functionally possible, as I just said. But that would be the compromise. Guys who are big on border security get their way right away, but people who want pathways don't have to wait anywhere near as long as they would have. And all it requires is that the first step be the thing that's mandated by law anyway. Your take on this, David Almasi.
Well, I certainly don't like the amnesty part of it, but I think the border security is an absolute must. I mean, you have to have border security, and unfortunately, that's the thing that I think is going to kill immigration reform, is because there's no way the liberals are looking to have the border security element. I mean, Obama wants to put it later. Even people like Marco Rubio are willing to put it later in order to get this so-called political benefit of amnesty. And that you can't have immigration reform without border security. So, I mean, I'm half and half on your idea, but I certainly like the border security idea.
Well, my approach will be the first time that we would finally have border security placed first, and of course that actually deserves to be first. I mean, let's face it, Bob Weiner, to you, let's all agree on the following. I hope you'll agree with me on this. We should never, ever allow our political leaders or our government leaders to tell us that the enforcement of existing law should ever be contingent upon the passage of new. Bob Weiner.
Well, the train has left the station on immigration reform unless the Republicans want to continue to get the Democrats to have 71% of the Hispanic vote. The problem with your proposal specifically, Alan, is that GAO can't certify. The government has to do the counting. So you have the Justice Department doing it. And the other thing is that the White House will do the certifying. And what you have now, I know you talked about the GAO saying the first time for a couple of weeks, but USA Today has reported that this is the first set of years, these last couple of years, that they're more out than in from the United States.